Okay, Javier, do you have, or do I have your brainstorming handout, or do you have yours?
I gave it to Carla, and Carla gave it to me, but I don't have it right here. I remember my...
Can you tell me about your problem here, starting off with this prompt I wish to learn more about?
Error correction.
Alright, and because you want to find out...
I want to find out which are the techniques or the ways to correct the students that show more effectiveness. So I don't have...
Okay, so error correction. So in order to find out, in order to find out
which techniques have more or show more effectiveness.
Okay, so which techniques show more effectiveness? Now, when you say that, it leads me to believe that we're going to focus more on the learning, when probably I would suggest that we focus more on the teaching as far as the techniques that they use.
Mm-hmm.
If you use words like to find out which one works best or which one is better, then we have to analyze the learning that takes place as a result of the technique, and so that
is more complicated. Okay, so we go for the teaching.
So we have error correction, and because I want to find out, think of a question word that you might use.
Maybe which techniques are more used?
Because I want to find out, and then a question word. How, what, where, why.
Which are the most used techniques for the teachers, or no?
All right. If you see that, which are the ones that are most used? Okay, let's say we find out that one's used more than the other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that still doesn't tell us much about error correction. Let me ask you a different question.
Okay.
Error correction. Are you interested in oral error correction, that is through spoken speech, or do you want error correction that looks at writing in the way that we correct?
The oral correction.
And I'm assuming, looking at in the classroom setting?
Yes.
All right. So you're looking at error correction, how they correct, and have you done your literature review that related to error correction?
The previous literature review that I wrote was about language transfer, and I included something about error analysis and error correction, but not only focus on error correction.
Okay, and what do you recall some key concepts from your literature review from last semester that relate to error correction?
I recall. Kind of. No. I have to read the.
Okay. So, for example, some key terms that come to mind with error correction would be like recast, right? And you're analyzing how often they do recasts, and maybe even meta discourse. Like you're basically you're looking at a discourse analysis where you're looking at what the teacher says and how the students respond.
Okay.
All right. Now, when you're looking at error correction, all right, going back to our questions, I wish to learn more about error correction because I want to what? Because I want to find out how they do this. I want to find out why this happens. I want to find out when this happens. I want to find out because I want to know.
Well, actually, since I was focused on the techniques, maybe a good question would be like to find out the moments when the teacher corrects students.
All right, when the moments that they.
When the teachers correct.
Okay. All right, so when they. All right. So. let's look at steps 2 and step 3 in our handout. So step 2, we have to examine something. So what do you want to examine? Do you want to examine what type of conduct, behaviors,
Reactions, attitudes from.
attitudes from who? The students?
Also, I'm changing right now because I had in the paper like observing attitudes and reaction from students when they are corrected.
Okay. All right.
I don't know if I have to change that part.
All right. So the attitudes of the students when they're being corrected. All right. Now, have you based this on your own practical experience? I mean, are you basing this on a problem that you faced?
Like yes, when I was learning English here in the major, like when someone corrects us, it was like, okay, I don't want to participate anymore, or
Okay.
like teachers were looking for the moment to correct us.
All right. So the way in which they corrected sometimes demotivated the students.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And all right. So all right. So you can focus on you want to examine the attitudes regarding how students feel about the ways that teachers provide feedback, error correct. Okay. We have to figure out what teachers. Let me think here. Let me try to think of the best way to approach this. You're probably going to have to do some sort of discourse analysis.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, one way to do this is look at the exchange. So you're looking at the initiation, response, and follow-up. That exchange that happens is very common in a classroom setting, where you're looking at when the teacher initiates an exchange that is error correction. That is an example of error correction. Now, you need to be focused in your literature review around certain types of error correction, so that you can start identifying the types of error correction that happens. Once you've done that and you ask the students about their own opinion about how they feel about the class, then they're going to tell you, oh, I like the class because of this, because the teacher does this, or maybe I feel shy about talking because when I do this happens. So you're going to be trying to connect what the student feels and how they respond, how they feel in class, versus the type of error correction that the teacher is taking place. That's the type of error correction that the teachers are using. So I mean, I think that's a possibility, but in your literature review, I need to see kind of what concepts, how you're going to organize your theory around these research questions, because I still need to, we need to work on some clear research questions here that look at maybe when or how does a teacher correct, or how does a teacher use recasts or some other error correction technique, right, in their own class. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that the teacher is going to be using these, and you can talk about those types in your literature review. And then do kind of analysis about those types. You know, when does it happen, and how does it happen?
Okay, but by taking into consideration the students' reactions and how do they feel, I might not going back to the techniques, like to the learning process.
Yeah, you're going to be kind of seeing. You're going to be doing an analysis of what the teacher, the type of error correction that the teacher implements.
Okay.
And then you're also going to be asking how their teachers, the students' opinions. And then you're going to be trying to look for patterns. So do the students always dislike when the teacher corrects this way?
Okay.
Or do they really like the class and the teacher's correcting this way? And you can draw some,
So in my literature review,
Uh-huh.
am I going to include different types of error correction?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to like to be more specific in the ones that I'm going to.
Well, you're going to be talking. I mean, I need to see the literature review and how many you're talking about, but I know there are like 4 or 5 that are really common that I know you could talk about, and maybe there's some other aspects of motivation that you might want to include in your theory that relate to error correction. I don't know. You have to, but to link that. But for example, the use of repetition, where they are using repetition, maybe that's more motivating or less stressful for the students if they do that, versus when the teacher says, no, that's wrong. Like when they give direct feedback, right? So you're going to have all these classifications that you're going to say, oh, there's different types. There's indirect, direct. Sometimes we just use repetition. There's recast. And so
I include the most common. And
yeah, you're going to...
If I find out some other error correction technique in my observations, in my research, do I go back to the literature review and I add this information?
Yeah, you're probably going to have, in your literature review, you're going to cover most of the types of error correction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I don't think you're going to have a lot of cases where you observe something that you didn't talk about. You shouldn't. Should put it that way.
Okay.
Most of what you talk about in the literature review, should apply, and some more than others. And if there's some that don't apply, that's okay. But everything needs to be mentioned in the literature review. You can't talk a lot about your findings that don't relate to the literature. That's the thing you don't want to do. So if you have a little bit more in your literature review that you don't talk about, you just say, in this case, in my research, these weren't present. These types of error correction weren't present, or if they were present, it was minimal.
Okay.
You just mention it briefly and move on. But I mean, I think that's a good approach. Right now, you need to find the literature that you want to talk about. Thinking about your error correction and these recasts, and when I say error correction, some of it's error correction and some of it's just discourse. Like when we're having a conversation, there are recasts and things, but I'm not correcting you.
Yes.
Maybe it's just clarification. Remember the clarification, yes. and so you can talk about that in your theory, even though it's not error correction per se. It's just normal discourse, negotiation between two people trying to have a conversation. So I would encourage you to don't feel like you're limited to error correction necessarily, saying that you're only looking at when the teacher says you're right, you're wrong, or it includes other aspects. And so I would include that in your theory also. So it's not, they may or may not put something on the board. If they do, that's part of your analysis. But maybe, they don't write anything on the board, and it's just they even do like nonverbal communication. They go, like what, right? So that's feedback. You might use the word feedback instead of error correction.
Okay. Because
feedback, is means kind of a negotiation where you're actually giving back information, feedback, but not necessarily quote unquote correcting.
The correction.
So just be careful with the terminology, and in your literature review, that all has to be very clear.
Okay.
What you mean by error correction, feedback, verbal, nonverbal communication, eye contact, maybe even, that you have to decide what you want to include in your theory. But I think you've got, there's a lot of possibilities. You have a lot of information you should be able to find that relate. So the main thing is going to be trying to narrow it down enough that pertains to what you want to measure. Always ask yourself, when you're doing your literature review, what am I going to evaluate when I do my own research? How am I going to measure this thing that I'm talking about, this concept?
Okay.
All right. A lot of it's going to be very easy, like recasts. Okay, you can measure that. Even nonverbal communication, perhaps you can measure that. But I think, yeah, I think you're on the right track here. Just make sure that you find some good literature. Start writing up your literature review. Have you added your Google Drive document to Canvas?
No, I haven't. I'm going to.
Do you have any questions about what to do there? If you,
I think I just have to put in the Google Drive and to paste the link in the name list of the thesis.
right, and week 1 we have this page called Student Thesis List.
Yes.
So just like we did in Applied Linguistics, you'll add your name here. I've included a template, Thesis Seminar template, that you can open up, and you can copy and paste this information over to your own Google Drive document, just like we did.
Every semester.
Right.
The template.
So you can start, it's a different template, but it's the
Yes.
same idea. So just follow the same template, leave it the way it is as far as all these, the different information, abstract, and the title of the work, the headings. And also I'm asking everyone to add your link here and then add these 4 steps. These 4 steps come from the handout.
Okay.
So basically the information you have in your handout I'd like to see here so that it's clear on kind of the direction of your research, and we can use that, and then I'll compare this to what you have in your own literature review.
Okay.
All right. One last thing, under modules for week 2 there's a link called Developing an Argument. I'd like for you to look at this information. There's a lot here, but it talks about how to organize your literature review.
Okay.
And it talks about different logical patterns that are possible, thinking, so you can start thinking about how you want to organize your information. So please look at that, and we'll start from there. Next week, if you have whatever you upload in Google Drive, I'll start to look at if you want me to. Just send me an email. But each week now we'll start looking and try to upload as much as you can each week so that I can give you feedback based on what you have so far.
Okay.
All right. And if you have questions about or problems finding literature, we need to talk about that right away.
Okay.
All right. So that's basically it. Do you have any questions or?
Well, I have a question, but it will be like in the research. Like I wanted to include like private and public school, but I think I have to go for only one option.
Not necessarily.
Well, it will be like a good idea to analyze different.
What? No, I don't think you have to focus on public or private schools. Basically all the teachers to a certain degree are going to be doing these types of feedback. So
Okay.
I don't think you're going to have much of a problem finding the teachers. The only thing I'm thinking about is whether or not you need to do some sort of survey first to select your teachers. But most teachers are providing feedback to a certain degree, so I don't think you're going to have to do. I don't think you'll have a problem finding teachers to do your research. We can talk about that more as I see how your literature review is coming, and I need to see also your research questions.
Okay.
So go ahead and add your research questions, even though you don't have your literature review finished. Just go ahead and add those questions at the end of your literature review. That way I can kind of see the direction of your research, and we'll keep thinking about participants and the selection process a little bit later once we see how your literature review starts to come together.
Okay.
But at this point I don't think it can be public or private, or if you want to focus on a certain type of teacher like elementary teachers only, or if you want to observe maybe an elementary and then a university teacher, or if you want to focus on different types of English classes like general English versus ESP, or academic English like here in the BA.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. So at this point I don't think we need to make a decision or be too concerned about that.
Okay.
And I think you're going to be able to find participants for your research. That won't be a problem. So.
Okay.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, well, we'll see you. Have a good week, and I'll see you next week.
Okay, teacher.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.